Matters Board in public sector. And today we have a really interesting topic, one that has been a topic of conversation for a while. It's about relationships and culture, the do's and don'ts in public service boards. And before I invite our guest speaker this evening, my name is Rose Sang. I'll be moderating this session. With me is Kantai from the Secretariat, who then will be assisting us, with the technology. I'm sure we have Mrs. Wanga and Hannah as well from the Secretariat, and we really want to explain our appreciation for the hard work that you put in to ensure that these programs run when they do run. I know we were to have a session in September, and apologies that we didn't. There was too much going on with the awards, with the conference, and many other activities, but we are back. And so for the next couple of months, we will continue with the mentorship program for the women on boards. A few housekeeping matters. Please, let's put our mics on mute. If you have a question, a comment, please put it in the chat. Our speaker will speak for about 45 minutes, and then thereafter we will have the virtual breakaway rooms facilitated by some of the women on boards members, and then thereafter we'll come into plenary. So our speaker will then be the roving ambassador in this virtual room, so that then you can have a more intimate discussion around various topics. So this evening we are grateful to have one of our brand ambassadors, a champion of women. They say he for she. And I'm hoping that one day, Daktari, you might be able to set up an organization called He for She, so that we can have as many men championing for us, around those board tables. So Dr. Kipngetich is not new to us. He has presented on several sessions in various topics. He has mentored a lot of us, including myself. And we recently had a cohort that went through the program with the Women on Boards ambassadors. So it's always a pleasure to have you here, Daktari. I will allow you to then unmute yourself and walk us through your presentation this evening. We're certainly looking forward to the conversation. Karibu sana.
Okay, thank you very much, Rose, and welcome, ladies, to this event. One of you, okay, so at least you have muted.
Kantai, could you please mute everyone for us? Thank you. Okay, apologies for that. Yeah, please proceed, Daktari. Sorry, Daktari, you're on mute. Okay, now we can hear.
She muted everybody. Yes. Okay, so today we are going to talk about public service, and I guess some of you are already in private sector, probably never worked for public service, and so it gives you sometimes challenges to understand public service. It has a lot of myths, a lot of innuendos, a lot of rumors, a lot of facts, even, but overall, public service and private service, private sector, are sides of the same coin. Remember, we have, private and public have the same customer, the citizen. So it's the same. Whether, for example, me in Jubilee and Kenya government, we have the same customer, the citizen of Kenya, and so when they pay tax or they buy our services, so all of us must figure out a way of collaborating. Now, public service, in my view, is, in terms of hierarchy, should be the senior one, the one with the high hierarchy. Why? You see, public service is the management of common services, that which cannot exclude. If you look at from your definition of economics, anything which is a public good is that which you cannot exclude somebody else. So public service, a road, for example, you cannot exclude. So then it has to go in the pool and that pool then therefore provides common services to all citizens, and so that is why we call it a public good. So the primary role of government is to manage public goods, and so private sector manages private goods. So that is really the distinction, and it's always an honor. In fact, I always say the greatest honor you can have in your life is to do public service. Myself, I did almost 20 years in public service, and I always say it is the greatest honor and privilege to have extended my time to do public service. If you read Lee Kuan Yew's book, the former Prime Minister of Singapore, the title of the book is The Making of Singapore. And he really emphasized the role public service plays in delivering national development. Public service provides the foundation. The public goods is the foundation for private sector or private goods to thrive on it. Okay. I mean, if you say you are the governor of Nairobi, what are the public, you don't own the buildings, but you are in charge of the common services, the roads, the sewers, the water, the lighting, all those are the common services. And so therefore, if you focus on the common services, cleanliness, then your city becomes more attractive to investors. So private capital flows in, and that is where jobs are going to come from. So public service is not a place where you create jobs. You don't create jobs from public service. You actually create jobs from private sector, but public service must facilitate, must provide the environment, security services, water services. All those are the common goods that then provides the framework. And so therefore, that's why I'm saying it's an honor if you get into a public service board to then be contributing to those common services that then provides the framework for a country to thrive. And so if you ever get appointed to public service, always see it as I'm here to serve. Okay. And most of it is to parastatals or commissions. Now, government has tried to provide a framework called Mwongozo. Initially, it was a bit confusing, and practices were different from one organization to another one. But government streamlined that. And if you ever get appointed to a public service board, or you're already in one, you should have read Mwongozo. And if you have not, if you are hoping to get into a public service board, then you definitely be given a copy of Mwongozo, okay? Which is then the guidelines of how to run public sector boards. And public sector boards vary. There are those which are service-oriented, like KWS, for example, is a service-oriented organization, or the business one, the ones supposed to generate income. Kenya Power is a good example, or the regulator ones, like Central Bank or Insurance Regulatory Authority or things like those. And then there are research institutions, and there are a few miscellaneous ones that don't fall in those categories. So you have a myriad, a varied sense of different institutions. And if you're appointed, say, to a research institution as an accountant, of course, there are accounting services and ideas of accounting. So typically, when Mwongozo actually defines the diversity of a board. Now, whether the appointing authorities do that, it's neither here nor there, and I'll talk about it. But generally, if you look at many acts of parliament that creates most of these institutions, ideally, I mean, by law, the president is the one who appoints the chair, and then the ministers or cabinet secretaries appoint the members. That is typically there are a few variations, like say if you look at say KWS, for example, the Director General is appointed by the President also and the Chair. But there will be slight variations in the law, but generally the members are appointed by the Cabinet Secretary, and the President appoints the Chair. So for those of you who are lobbying, there's a new government in place. If you want to be a chairman, you know where to lobby, Office of the President. And if you are a member, you lobby through Cabinet Secretaries. Now, presidents over time, I mean, from the ones I've known from Moi, Kibaki, Uhuru, and now Ruto, ministers also seek concurrence with State House, even for members. So we are yet to see how this one appoints. But the last three, all the ministers always were seeking, they take a name and they debate with the president and say, okay, is this suitable or things like those. In some circumstances, some of them are vetted by NIS in some sensitive government agencies. So, but it's not something to worry about. If you have no criminal case or things like Al-Shabaab, nothing to worry about. So that's generally how appointments are made. Now, sometimes you might say, oh, you know, why should they be appointed by politicians? They are the same all over the world. Whether you go to America or UK or France or Russia or Australia or India, it doesn't matter. They are political processes. Either there are usually three things they consider, and it depends, it's a continuum. They can look at competence, merit, meritocracy, and then they also look at loyalty. It's the same, whether in America or wherever. So what I would suggest always typically is make sure you're competent. Go where your competence will show most, and so you will go for that. And then also political alignments. You know, in America, it's basically around ideology. In UK, the same. Okay, many countries around political party ideology. In our case, in Kenya, it defines many things. If you read our constitution, it talks about ethnic diversity, gender diversity. So there are many other factors to be considered. I guess it's even the same all over the world. You have to have a diverse board either way, okay? So that's what Article 10 of the Constitution defines. And then also there's a whole chapter on public service in the Constitution, and it defines a lot of those things. So generally, appointments will be political, that expect, and it's around loyalty and things like those. You have seen the cabinet, the same. So a board of directors is no different. So now the topic for today is about do's and don'ts. Okay, one, there is no difference between a public sector board and a private sector board. All of them have the same duties. Okay, and by having those duties, you have to perform them. So what are the duties of a board? The primary role is oversight over management. It's just a second layer. So if you look at the way good governance structures are arranged, the directors represent shareholders in a typical company. They represent the shareholders. So, but when they sit on the board, they are oversighting management on behalf of the shareholders. So similarly, when you are sitting in a public sector board, you are there to represent the shareholder. Who is really the shareholder? The shareholder is the political party that sponsored you, because on behalf of, you know, political parties compete in the marketplace, which is politics. And then when they get to power, they have their own agenda. So if, for example, you are appointed, you have to literally read the agenda of UDA, the plan. But that agenda of UDA must also be in line with the Constitution and the various laws Parliament has passed. So you are representing the interests of the politicians who are really the shareholders on behalf of the citizens, because they are the elected representatives. So you are not representing wananchi direct. You are representing them indirectly through their elected representatives, who then are in power, okay? So that then you serve the interests of what they are planning for the people. That's a structure. So if you then go to a company, when you do oversight, who are your eyes internally? Your eyes internally are internal audit. So internal audit, are the eyes of the directors internally. That's why if you look at structures, internal audit reports to the board, okay, through the board audit committee. Then, who are then supposed to oversight for the CEO internally? It is compliance, risk and compliance. So risk and compliance is an internal control mechanism for management. Internal audit is the director's eyes so that they can oversight, okay? And then now the external auditors are the last layer, and then they report to Parliament. In a company, they report the AGM, which is the Parliament of the owners. So in this case, you can't report to the general public, you report to Parliament. So whenever you are appointed the board of Parastatal, make sure you have a very strong internal audit, which is your eyes, so that you can oversight the organization. And then the Auditor General, which is the external auditor, then comes to audit your work as directors and report to Parliament. So that is the governance structures, the way they have been framed. So whenever you appointed the board, always make sure whoever you approve as the internal auditor is strong enough to oversee and report to you. So then if management manipulates, the red flag will be raised by the internal auditor and say, hey, you have not stated correctly. And so strengthen the office of internal audit so that then they become your eyes. Then your oversight is truly functional. So many parastatals are very weak internal audit. And so when you have weak internal audit or somebody who can be compromised, management then can present misleading information. And remember, by law, you take responsibility. As the board of directors, you take responsibility for the operations of that parastatal. So therefore, your role is oversight. And oversight is a very loaded statement. It's a lot of things. You take legal responsibility of the operations, but remember, the day-to-day running is by the CEO. Typically, the CEO is the secretary, but that exercise of secretarial work is delegated to the company secretary, because company secretaries are, CPS, stroke lawyers, whatever, or a combination of them. But the CEO then runs the company on a day-to-day basis and implements the decisions of the board. So even in private sector, it's the same. The CEO implements the decisions of the board, and that is why they have their own management meetings they will do. And then make sure that whatever papers they present the board, they have agreed with the board on the format, what information should flow, and usually typical standard information. The accounts must be presented, the core business, what are the operations of the core business, and you have to determine what comes to the board, what stays at management, or at the level of aggregation. It varies from company to company. The risk appetite of the board, they can say, we want more detailed information for this particular project, or less detailed. So it depends on how much you trust management. So many things. So the board, therefore, number 2, is to support management to execute the mandate, because you are not there on a day-to-day basis. Mongoso defines that you meet once in a quarter. And should there be extra meetings, you must then seek permission of the State Corporations Advisory Committee. The custodian of Mongoso is the State Corporations Advisory Committee. So you must then seek their permission to go outside Mongoso, and you must give justification. So now, some parastatals, of course, have abused that privilege. So others, you read, they met, 90 times in a year. The Auditor General, the external auditor, then, which reports to Parliament, will flag that out, because they are the overseers on behalf of the public through their elected representatives. So SCAC will always flag any illegal meetings. So please make sure that you follow the guidelines of Mongoso. Similarly, please read the law that establishes that corporation. Okay. Most of them have been consolidated. If, for example, you are sitting on the board of a public university, each university originally used to have their own act of parliament. Now they have been collapsed into one university act, because it was just a duplication of the other. So please, if you are sitting on a board of a university, please read the Universities Act. Okay. If you are sitting on a board of a regulator, that sector will always have a law that established it, including the regulator. And so please get to know the boundaries of what you can and cannot do. So please make sure you obey the law. That thing will haunt you if you don't follow the law. Let me give you an example. If you look at the people who are being dragged to go and testify in Parliament, okay, they usually are things of several years behind, because the Auditor General always delays in their audits. So some of the things they're reporting for some corporations relate to 3 years ago. Now, the political system that appointed you 3 years ago could have changed. And then you are being now taken, based on your accounts, to Parliament. Because whenever there's an audit query, okay, raised by the external auditors, it will go into the parliamentary report. It's reported to Parliament. Then Parliament summons you. So remember, those who are summoned to Parliament, their accounts were qualified. When you have clean accounts, you don't go. For me, for the 8 years I was in KWS, I never ever stepped in Parliament, because our accounts were unqualified. So make sure that your accounts are unqualified. If they are qualified, you will be dragged into Parliament. You have to go and explain to Parliament. And when you go to Parliament, MPs are very cheeky. So what they do, if they see the violation, they tell you, read the law. So they tell you, okay, can you read the law first? Okay. And then, can you read the violation? And then they start asking you, so you are guilty as charged, isn't it? Because you have read the law, they have told you read the law. And then on the other hand, they tell you read the violation. Then now you are there sheepishly with your CEO looking at each other, and it's like, okay, so what are we supposed to do? Now, some members of Parliament become extortionists at that point, and they say, okay, if you pay me something, we could forgive you. Please obey the law. And it may not be even Parliament passing you. It could be the reputational risk that then you carry, because it will be a headline. in the newspapers or blogs of the violation that you did. And usually the headlines is, it could be even an allegation, but they will say 50 million lost or 100 million lost or 1 billion lost. And then they put your name there. They say you lost X number of billions. So look at the reputation risk. Remember, these days the internet never forgets. So tomorrow when you are applying for another position somewhere, private sector, they will Google you up and then they will say, can you tell us what was this about? And it could be referred to a totally different period. And if you try to deny, it can be very difficult. So when you support management to do their work correctly, so that then you avoid audit queries. So make sure one of your duties as a board member, and because many parastatals have qualified accounts, please aim at making sure that your accounts are unqualified. Then you'll never step in parliament, because clean accounts, you are never summoned. So support management to obey the law. Then consultation. There's much more consultation in public service than private sector. Why? It's because the reporting lines are many. So you have the parent ministry. Okay, you have a PS who sits on your board. Typically, many PSs don't come unless you are a large parastatal. Okay, so they normally delegate them. So to officers, make sure that that officer briefs the PS. And if they don't brief the PS correctly, use your own back channel and go and brief the PS. Because the PS is the overall accounting officer for the ministry plus the parastatals below. So make sure that your CEO is briefing and comes to the board and confirms that they have briefed the PS. Okay, and these days the cabinet secretaries are more or less executive, and so you may also need to have an executive brief for the minister. And the other reporting line is to OP. That office called Head of Public Service. Some parastatals are too important. OP usually puts a spotlight on some of them. So you have to have a reporting line. So for example, KWS was one of those. So I used to have another back channel to the Head of Public Service, and I used to brief the Head of Public Service regularly, even sometimes by telephone on what we do. So that then if for example, they see a headline of human-wildlife conflict, it doesn't surprise them, because then that would also be something that catches the attention of the president. So the first thing a president calls is not directly to the agency, but to Head of Public Service. So if the Head of Public Service is familiar with what you do, because it has used public interest, then they can answer the query immediately, what the president is asking, rather than, oh, let me investigate. By the time they do investigation, it means then you are a little distant, and they usually get upset, because then it has probably given the government some bad reputation. So always, let the CEO have a backlink to OP. And then, of course, parliamentary committee. We now have parliamentary committees on various issues. It will always be in good order that you brief the chair and some key vocal members of a committee. You will get to know them anyway. So the chair of the parliamentary committee that deals with that sector or that area that you are in, it will always be good to consult. So make sure your CEO and probably your chair constantly are briefing the various ministers and parliamentary committees, because they are the oversight. Okay. For my particular case, I had to extend it to the judiciary. We wanted to strengthen wildlife crime, and the law provided for discretionary sentences. So we constantly used to, brief magistrates because they are the ones who deal with the bulk of the cases on the effects of law sentencing. And when you alert them to that, they can use their discretion as judges or arbitrators to then met stronger sentences. So I was reporting to an independent arm of government about what I was doing and the implications of some of their decisions on what we were doing. So don't fear to reach out to judiciary if, for example, they have discretionary power. Or if you don't have, then you seek to change the law in parliament. So you then sponsor a bill in parliament to strengthen some of the things. Then the judiciary will respond because they are the ones who enforce sentences. So, and then probably the other one is, please don't, as I said earlier on, Mwongozo allows you at least 4 ordinary meetings in a year, and the rest must require special dispensation of the State Corporations Advisory Committee. And then, of course, make sure you read board papers. I think that's the same across whether in private sector or public sector. Always make sure you get your board papers 7 days before. That's the usual good practice. And then you read them so that then when you are in the board, you are contributing. I've seen boards where board members are asking for things which are already in board papers, and it shows you never read or you are careless. And then the other thing is, I've seen some boards misbehave. Typically, a board meeting should not exceed 2 hours. Board papers must be written in such a way that board meetings don't exceed 2 hours. At worst, if you go to 3 hours, then you have a very inefficient chair. But I've seen others take a whole day. Okay, we come at 9, we take tea, and then we take lunch, come back after lunch, then we take 4 o'clock tea. How can you have a meeting for 8 hours? It's not productive, it is exhausting, it is meaningless. By the time you reach the 8th hour, people have forgotten what the first hour, what the resolutions of the first hour. So make sure that you get familiar. And if you have a rogue chair, if you are a board member and you have a rogue chair, please don't fear to confront. It is your responsibility as a board member to say, these are the good practices. Let's read Mwongozo again. The guidelines are very clear. I mean, if you read the standard corporate governance rules, are all already documented in a government approved paper. So the cabinet has approved it as the standard. Then in terms of the don'ts, I would just say a few. One is don't go operational. Your role is strategic. So the boundary is not so clear cut. It's clear, but it's not. There are some areas of overlap, especially if it's an organization which has a history of poor governance. Then you might go operational. But generally, you're supposed to remain at the strategic level, an oversight level. The rest is management. The minute you're dealing with management, operational issues, then you have an incompetent management. So in which case, you fix it as a board. So number 2 is don't loop the CEO. Very tempting. The link between the board and management is the CEO. That's the nexus. Okay, including even the company secretary. Whenever you want to consult an issue, go through the CEO. If you want to talk to company secretary, go through the CEO. Okay. Now, if the CEO is wrong, then you change the CEO. But the practice is don't look the CEO. Many chairmen, especially, always entertain feedback directly from staff to them, and the CEO is not aware. So you say something in the board and say, I was told. Then the CEO is sitting there like a duck. And they're like, who told you? Okay, I'm here. I'm supposed to give you true information. And so why are you, looping the CEO? Because once you entertain that, you're creating chaos in that organization. So be careful about looping the CEO, okay? And as I said, if you have a CEO then who is opaque to the board, that's the wrong CEO. So remember, the maxim we always say is a good board is not a substitute for a bad CEO. No. Let me repeat it again. A good board is not a substitute for a bad CEO. Both of them must be good. So a good board should appoint a good CEO, and they work together and make sure they respect their boundaries. Now, there are issues mainly in many parastatals that there is an office of a chairman. That's a problem. Now, ideally, there should never be an office of a chair. The chairman should not only come for board meetings, and if there is some consultation, that consultation should happen within the office of the CEO or a designated office where they can rest, or even the boardroom, okay? And they go away. The temptation, if you have an office, is you now start calling staff members for briefings and you start looping the CEO. Then you create now reporting challenges in the organization. So my recommendation always is never have an office of a CEO, of a chair, okay? Everything should be conducted through the CEO. And if an office is required, there must be justification, okay? So that also prevents unnecessary visits. The chair and the board members should not be, hanging around the organization to do what, unless invited by management, and it's usually for a specific event, and that's it. So avoid unnecessary visits, and also conflict of interest. Avoid conflict of interest. I know that the appointing authorities will always say, I put you there so that then you become my macho. The answer is always tell them, you put me here to protect public interest, for which you are elected. You are elected on a certain mandate. And this parastatal or public board is there to assist you achieve that mandate you are given by the public. So if therefore you then make me do something that conflicts, okay, then you are not assisting me serve you, okay? So there are those, for example, that tell you, okay, you are a board member or you are the chairman, there's this particular contract, nataka kitu. Let me tell you, when the audits come, you will be alone. Parliament, when the Auditor General audits and there's a query, and that query goes to Parliament, they will look at who put the signature, who gave the approval. The board resolution will be brought on the table, and the chair of the committee will tell you, Ebu Soma, look at your board resolution. Look at what the auditor said. It was outside your mandate. So what do you want us to do? Okay, what does the law say? We will recommend your prosecution. Please don't go there. It's very tempting because it involves some parastatals have huge projects, billions. It's very tempting to violate the law. But when that breach has been picked by the auditors, you will be alone on the dock. The politicians that told you to conflict or to engage in corruption will not be there. Yeah. So my principle always is, I would rather get removed from the board than to do a violation that will take me to Parliament. And usually by the time you reach Parliament, it will probably be another regime. because of the time periods. By the time committees look at the accounts, the PIC, the PSCs, by the time they look at all that, it's usually several years down the road, and circumstances will have changed dramatically. So just follow the law, okay? Avoid things of conflict of interest, and avoid any quarrels. So in conclusion, so then we can do a Q&A, is it's a great honor always to serve in public. I mean, even us, when I was in high school, our school song always talked about, you know, the weight of government. It's always a good thing to serve the public. I know sometimes public service is not very attractive because of issues of governance and conflicts of interest, but it's still a great honor. I mean, anywhere in the world to serve the public. Sometimes it's not even about serving the rich per se. It's about implementing policies that affect the vulnerable, the poor, the sick. You know, if you go to Kenyatta National Hospital, can you imagine if you streamline it and then you save lives? You feel your heart, okay? So consider public service as a calling, that priestly calling that you are called to service. It's not about even the money. They give you 20,000 shillings gross, net of tax around 14,000 per meeting. So is that something that you would lose your reputation for? The answer should be no. It is something that 20,000 gross is a token of appreciation, really. That should be it, yeah? And please go out there, please serve diligently, do your job, do it right, and do it with a lot of honor. And if you do that, build your reputation around, I'll give service. I've seen some people saying that 20,000 is too little. I am a businessman, I do other things. Give it to charity or give it back to the organization. So that's it, ladies. So I want to stop there, and then you can ask me questions. Some of you have experiences, others have queries or public service duties. I'm here to answer. Back to you, Ross.
Thank you, Daktari. Very interesting session. The governance structure, for me, I think has been the light bulb, just understanding the marketplace and who the stakeholders are. So I suppose it's time for us to read the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, isn't it? Given that is now, what is at play in terms of public service.
I mean, Rose, I mean, if you don't align yourself with what the public elected, the public elected Kenya Kwanza on the basis of their manifesto. And so that becomes the link. The shareholders is represented by members of parliament. Members of parliament are the AGM of the shareholders, the public. So when they meet in parliament, they will say, parastatal, this, why haven't you aligned? We are elected on that purpose. And so therefore the public wants you to. So you must, if you don't understand that, then you're in the wrong place. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. So I know that the ladies would like to ask a few questions.
Yes.
If we have any burning ones, please feel free to raise your hand and we can be able to unmute you. But as I said in the earlier in the conversation, we will be breaking out into 3 virtual rooms. Daktari will be in one, and we have 2 other ladies who have graciously offered to facilitate the sessions. And then we will swap every 10 minutes so that then you have an opportunity to ask some of those hard questions and interact more with Daktari. So very shortly, we will break into the virtual sessions, and we do have two co-facilitators. The first facilitator she has an interesting name, so I hope I will pronounce it right. CPA Hortensaya Canio. I hope I've pronounced it well. She's a lady accountant experienced in audit, risk, finance management, and strategic management. She holds an MBA in strategic management from the University of Nairobi. She also has a BBA in accounting and finance and is a CPA-K, member of ISPAC. In terms of her board experience, she has been elected as board of directors for the Association of Women Accountants. She also serves in the Member Services Committee as well as other committees, and she was recently appointed as a member to the Professional Standards Subcommittee by the Institute of Certified Public Accountants, ISPAC, in September 2022. So welcome, Madam Canio. We are really looking forward to having you facilitate one of the virtual rooms. Our other facilitator this evening is Caroline Mwanzi. She's the Director and Chief Change Catalyst of Huru Consult, an international management training and consulting company that she founded in 2007, following a rich career in corporate banking. As a consultant, she has worked across Africa, as well as Ireland and Mexico, globally on an online basis. Between 2015 and 2017, she served on the board of the Kenya Association of Women Business Owners and currently sits on the advisory board of Jareen Investments Limited, a medium-sized company that trades in fresh produce. So we couldn't have had better co-facilitators for this evening. So Kantai, I'll request that you kindly send us into our virtual rooms. I think Dr. you'll have one of the rooms. Caro and Ms. Canio will take the others. We'll do a 10-minute rotation and then come back for plenary. We can do a quick Q&A and close the session. So Kantai, please take us through our virtual rooms, please. The annual conference that's coming up, it's really an interesting session where we will be discussing Matters Board. Our theme this year will be Finding Your Sparkle. How do we connect the dots around life, work, and business? And so we have several discussion insights around women in leadership, resilience and reinvention, trends in today's boards, as well as ESG. So our chief guest is PS Zainab Hussein, who is no stranger to women on boards. And so she'll really be speaking about how do you find your sparkle, in the realm of life, work, and business. We have other speakers as well, including Winnie Ouko, who's the founder and CEO of Lattice Consulting. Dr. is going to be there, so a great chance for you to engage with him in a more informal setting. We have Neema Wamai, who's from Ipsos, and she'll be speaking about social listening. Very interesting case studies. You really don't want to miss that. Our brand ambassador, Patricia, will be speaking as well on several topics, including the founder of Cellulant, who has retired and is now the founder of Pani Africa, Ken Njoroge, just speaking to his story around, finding your passion and following it and being very successful. We also have Chris Tenano, who is the chairman of BlackRock. He was formerly with Safaricom, and he'll be speaking about digital disruption, what it is, and why should you care as board members. We have John Mwenda, who's the Director of Public Affairs and Communications at Coca-Cola, who will be speaking to the topic around ESG, why it matters, why as a board you need to be cognizant of it. And last but not least, we have Simon Wafubwa, who will be speaking about personal finance and some of the nuggets that you need to be aware of, given the high rate of inflation. So we have a whole 2 days packed. So if you do want to engage Dr. a bit more, as well as other board members, this is your chance to be able to come to Mombasa. We have lots of other activities packed. We have Water Zumba and several other activities. You don't really want to miss this. So Dr. your parting shot around the topic. And lastly, why should women attend the conference? What do they expect to hear from you? And what are they likely to take away?
Okay. my concluding remarks really, Rose, is that don't fear coming to public service. This is our country. We have no other country to go to. The success of public service is the success of Kenya. And which better country has given us that demonstration of the success than Singapore, the inspiration for Vision 2030. Singaporeans are the highest paid civil servants in the world. If you just Google the highest paid head of government in the world, is the Prime Minister of Singapore. But they are paying them very high salaries in lieu of them not being corrupt and running the country correctly. They set a foundation of a country where common services work. Okay, you don't have to own a car. In fact, it's the most expensive country to own a car. Reason is they are trying to encourage people to use public transport because public transport works. So even Kenya, public transport worked. Even me, I wouldn't have the incentive to own a car. Why? I would just take a train or a bus to my house. It's not far from where I am. So when public service works, a country works. When public service fails, a country fails. Even when you have a good public private sector. So a good private sector is no substitute for a failing public service. It's no substitute. What we have in Kenya today is we have created private solutions to public problems. Whenever there are potholes, buy a four-wheel. There is no water, drill a borehole. When the rubbish is not collected, have private rubbish collectors. That's not how to run a country. No. You run a country when you have a good public service. And so therefore, if you ever get appointed to a public service board, please discharge your duty because you owe it to your children and your children's children and all the generations after you. It is your responsibility. Please perform your role. I know it's difficult in a political environment, but it is what everybody goes through. And you can contribute to the reforms. Sometimes throwing a tantrum can change a law that improves governance in the country, even when you are the victim yourself. So don't fear. I left KWS because there were significant differences between me and OP. It was not between me and the board. It was between me and OP. And I told them, okay guys, we don't agree. Goodbye. I've been here for 8 years. I had 1 year to go. I said, okay, I'm okay. And I left. That was 10 years ago. I left in 2012. You have never seen my name in a newspaper. I've never been summoned by parliament, and I'm proud of it. If my example is anything to go by, you can copy it. Okay? So it is possible, it can be done, that you can stand for what you believe in public service, and public service becomes the better because of the stand you have taken. So I look forward to seeing you in Mombasa, where we can further discuss these issues of boards, and we enable you and help you to learn more on board dynamics, board developments, because there is no limit to learning, and life is about lifelong learning. Thank you. Back to you, Rose.
Thank you so much, Daktari. They say everybody can be great because everybody can serve. That was Martin Luther King. And so thank you for the insights this evening. I'm sure we're all living here better servants or better potential servants, to the public sector. Thank you, ladies, for your time. We apologize that we are 3 minutes off, but I think it's been a worthwhile engagement. To the Secretariat, led by Mrs. Wanga, Hannah, and Kantai, who we never see, but does a great job behind the scenes, we really want to say a big, big, big thank you. So have a good evening. God bless, and see you in Mombasa next week. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.